Inflation has steadily cooled over the past 2 years, despite seeing a slight stall in October and November of 2024. Prices for items like gasoline, used cars, and energy have declined accordingly. But food prices continue to outpace inflation, increasing by 28% since 2019.
I just spent $33 on dinner tonight. I'm literally just making like lasagna soup.
What are you talking about? Was $8.25, now $6.89. Like this is some amazing deal.
For 4 chicken breasts, $10 to $11.
86% of consumers reported feeling frustrated with rising grocery prices, and over a third said they have resorted to buying fewer items.
That said, only 85% of people are feeling frustrated with grocery prices. There's no way 15% of y'all just enjoy the fact that prices are going up.
That's one of the real gauges people have of their cost of living, because it's an important aspect of their cost of living. And it's something that we have a lot of exposure to. We go to the grocery store, we pick up the different products, we look at the prices.
So why are grocery prices still so high? And what can be done to bring the cost down?
I mean, probably a better president.
Like any other business, food processors, manufacturers, and retailers face various operating costs to get food from the farm to the grocery aisle. These costs play a key role in how products are priced. Just 15.9 cents for every dollar spent on food goes to the farm that actually produced it.
There's so much more that goes into the cost of our food than just the actual food itself. There's a lot that goes into the producing it, moving it around, the transportation, the marketing, getting it on the shelves. It's not just the food. It's all of the inputs that go into it.
Unexpected global events set the stage for a sudden rise in food costs.
It was a global pandemic. There were disruptions all around the world in terms of production. At the same time that you just have this unexpected, unprecedented wave of demand, that is a recipe for it to really break down and you to go into the grocery store and see empty shelves, or go into the grocery store and see really higher prices.
I love that the high IQ analysis that we keep getting from all of these finance channels and all of these finance specialists is that the pandemic is the reason why prices went up. It's because the supply chain was messed up. It wasn't, the fact that we printed over $6 trillion like that in a couple of years' time. It had nothing to do with that. It wasn't the printing of money that created the inflation. It was the fact that there was a virus going around. Okay.
Two, you had Russia invade Ukraine. That caused huge shocks to agricultural commodity prices, especially wheat. Well, this starts feeding back on itself, because what it does is it makes, let's say, animal food more expensive for cows, pigs, chickens, etc.
The surge in inflation added more pressure on food manufacturers and retailers.
All the costs that are incurred after the farm, it's all the processing costs, the energy costs, the wage costs, all these things contributed to much, much higher prices. And these all were rising from about mid-21 onward, and they continue to rise.
Really what you've had experienced since 2021 is sort of this massive, what we call cost pass-through that has occurred. The idea of cost pass-through is just, imagine I'm a manufacturer, I'm producing an item, and let's say it's a case of product, it costs me $10. I may turn around and sell that for, let's say, $18. Let's say my costs go up 20%. Now, all of a sudden, that means I'm paying $12 for, this product, or I'm incurring a $12 cost to make it. At minimum, I have to now charge $20. But likely I'm going to charge a little bit more than $20 because I have to protect what we call my gross margin rate. That goes to the wholesaler. Well, the wholesaler is now seeing a $2.50 increase. They not only have to raise their selling price by $2.50, but they may raise it by $2.75 to the grocery store. The grocery store now sees $2.75 of greater cost. So they may end up charging $3 more overall, because everybody's trying to protect their margin as we move through the supply chain.
Operating costs for food manufacturers reached a peak during the fourth quarter of 2022, seeing a nearly 19% increase compared to 5 years prior. But while operating costs have come down significantly, most experts remain pessimistic about a sudden deflation in food prices.
Once the price goes up, it tends to stay up. The inflation may come back down, so you don't see the big price increases, but outside of widespread depression, we don't tend to see prices falling across the board.
I'm going to give you the playbook on how they could actually get food prices down if our government actually cared about its citizens. Okay, transportation affects everything, specifically the price of oil, right? So let's say you have fertilizer that you grow your crops with. You have to truck that out using, or rather process that fertilizer using, oil, gasoline, right? You actually grow the product. You have all of these pumps and whatnot, maybe pumping water into your crops that to some degree use electricity, which comes from the price of gasoline. And then when you actually go and harvest, your crops, With tractors, you're using gasoline, oil, once again. What happens once you have them harvested and you start taking them out to the actual grocery stores? Again, the price of oil is affecting the price of goods. So if we started fracking in the United States, if we actually got the price of oil and gasoline down, the price of groceries would go down because there's 4, 5, 6, 7+ areas in every single food item where oil is driving up the price of that actual item.
There's some categories where we've seen prices come up and down. Eggs are a good example. Like, they did come back down quite a bit after the big surge. So it's not to say that there aren't individual prices that will come down, but as a category, most goods and services, once that price goes up, it stays up. Because again, you think of a big input cost in a lot of places are things like wages or building costs, things that would be difficult to then reverse. You just don't keep increasing them at the same pace.
There's been another popular theory behind the rising cost of groceries: price gouging.
The question is, have groceries gotten more expensive just because of inflation, that is, passing along higher prices, or is there more going on here?
We all need food to survive. No matter what the price is, what that has meant over the last couple of years is that retailers have been able to take advantage of this.
63% of Americans surveyed in 2024 blamed price increases on large corporations taking advantage of inflation. Corporate profits accounted for well over 40% of inflation between the end of 2019 and mid-2022. In comparison, corporate profit drove just 11% of price growth over the 40 years prior to the pandemic. A report from Groundwork Collaborative also revealed that some of the largest food corporations have openly discussed their ability to keep prices high, even as inflation cools down.
The grocery sector as a whole is deeply concentrated. They have very little competition. And so this is what some economists call tacit collusion, where, big companies sort of side-eye each other and listen to each other's earnings calls and think, hey, they're not lowering their prices, so we're not going to do that either. And that sort of facilitates this really sticky, high price situation that we find ourselves in.
What she's talking about there is the fact that food is becoming more and more centralized in the United States, right? And this kind of goes back to one of the oldest debates in America with Thomas Jefferson, where he thought the best version of America was a version of America where there were lots of rural homesteads, where people could grow their own food and be kind of independent or insulated from a broader economy where there might start to be monopolies in food or oligopolies like we're seeing today, right? More and more of these farms, these family farms, are being purchased up by these big companies that produce mass amounts of food. And it felt great for years when we saw the price of food going down because these big companies could be extra competitive. But now we're looking at it and we're going, well, now they have all of the chips in their favor. They have all of the bargaining chips. They're raising prices on us. And in fact, there's not as much competition as we thought, because a lot of these companies, even if they don't say it, they understand that, oh, if he raises prices by this much, I could try and beat him, or I could raise prices by this much. It's kind of like they're in bed together, even if they don't say it.
Report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture revealed a significant increase in market concentration within the food sector over the past 40 years. Between 2018 and 2020, just two seed companies controlled 72% of corn acres and 66% of soybean acres. And most metropolitan areas saw just 5 to 6 store chains accounting for most of the supermarket sales. But some economists remain skeptical about whether real price gouging is happening within the food sector.
We've not seen any evidence from the Service Annual Survey of unduly large gross margin rates, not only in grocery, but also what we call warehouse clubs and superstores. That's your Walmarts, your Targets, your Costco's.
Gross margin rate for some of the biggest US-centric grocery retailers have not seen enough gains to show price gouging. The same goes for food manufacturers that are more global in scale.
We have regulatory agencies to watch over this stuff for a reason, but I think there's plenty to explain what's gone on in the food price grocery store inflation based on underlying fundamentals in the market. You don't have to resort to arguments that, oh, this is price gouging on the part of these companies.
To account for high costs, more families are dipping into their savings or relying on their credit cards, buy now, pay later programs, or even payday loans to pay for their groceries. 60.5% of adults reported paying for groceries with a credit card in 2023.
That's not good, bro. It's not good when we're in a system that we have to take out debt to afford to eat. And a lot of that, yes, is probably each person spending too much to where food is now coming out of debt because they have too many expenditures. But still, everything else is so expensive and it came out of nowhere. Why? Because the government printed so much money that you can't fully blame these people for having lifestyle mismanagement.
It means that people are going to desperate lengths to buy something that is just essential.
In 2023, U.S. consumers spent an average of 11.2% of their disposable income on food, with an average family spending about $3,187 for food at home per year.
I can sit here and say that food expenditures are small relative to the income that most households make, but for poorer families, that's not the case. It is high.
In 2023, low-income households spent an average of 32.6% of their after-tax income on food, compared to just 8.1% for households earning the highest income.
If you're a low-income family, you have to spend on the essentials, right? There may not be much left after that. So as a result, what that means is that when prices for essentials rise, when prices for groceries rise, that really hits low-income folks the hardest.
During the pandemic, there were some extra programs that were put in place to really help people kind of beef up those benefits during the pandemic, and those have expired, but they did give an example of how we can strengthen those kind of programs. So if we're really all fired up about how expensive food prices are and we're worried about people being left behind, we do have public policies that we can shore up.
No, we don't need more government policies to come in and supplement the price of food or to make food cheaper through things like food stamps. Because right now we already have a problem in America where our government spends way more than it brings in. So if we keep finding new ways to spend money, we keep giving more money to people through food stamps, it's a short-term solution. We don't have a sustainable economy, and the government spending more than it brings in and then printing money to make up for that is the reason that we're in this mess in the first place, right? Is because we have a fiat currency where the government prints all this money, creates inflation, and that's why we saw food prices jump so much so quick after the pandemic and through the pandemic. So yes, in the short term, you feel good. Oh, we subsidized food for poor people. No, we need the government out of our lives, man.
At the same time, we do need to address the underlying issue of profiteering in the retail industry. Your dollar only goes so far if someone at the top is making everything you buy more expensive.
In August 2024, the FTC and the Justice Department held a first public meeting on illegal price gouging in several industries, including food and agriculture. While over 40 states ban price gouging, there's no federal law preventing corporations from gouging prices.
And then, next year we have a big tax fight coming up, and raising the corporate tax rate, as unlikely as it might seem in this political environment, would actually be a real deterrent to these big companies to price gouge their consumers. Because
I love how they're talking about anti-price gouging laws like that's the new solution. That's what we need. And maybe some of you guys think that we need anti-price gouging laws to stop these retailers or whoever from upping the price of your food. Let's think about this logically. Was this a conversation that we had to have 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago? The answer is no, right? Price gouging wasn't even on our radar. Did the system suddenly break just because people got more greedy? No, these companies didn't get any more greedy than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. Capitalism still existed then. The problem is that the government printed so much money, and now we're having to deal with the ramifications. But everyone cheered, woo, I got my stimulus check. Congratulations, this is what the cost was.
Because price gouging is a lot less fun if you have to ship a bunch of your earnings over to the IRS. And so there are policy tools that we can use to address this issue. And I think it's really critical that we start to look really expansively at the things that we can do to make
That's what we need, more government involvement
for everyday consumers.
But some experts question how far policies can really go to affect food prices.
There's no silver bullet in terms of bringing down food costs.
We've went through a brutal inflationary cycle for food. There's really nothing government policymakers could really do about this. This is not something unique to the United States. This has been felt around the world. And right now we just have to wait and see how things will play out as we move forward.
The uncertainties introduced by the current political climate also make it challenging to predict the future of grocery prices.
There's no doubt that tariffs will massively make things more expensive, especially food. There's a lot of food that we all like to eat that we don't grow in the United States. So any food that we import gets a lot more expensive when you add a tax on that. Same thing with mass deportations. I mean, we have workers in this country who really prop up our food system.
That one is true.
Make sure that the things that we want on our tables get grown, get packaged, get driven across the country. And when you start to really harm that workforce and send them away, that harms our entire economy. So I think there's absolutely no doubt that things will get more expensive under some of the policies that we're seeing the Trump administration propose.
I've just accepted that what I got to do is stop trying to find joy in my food like I used to. I just got to start eating tuna, fruits, and vegetables. And that's about it. And look, at the end of the day, it's healthier too, right? I guess the one upside is they're forcing us to maybe be a little bit healthier. I know a lot of whole foods are not cheaper, but tuna is.